Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're digging into something really complex, romantic or sexual relationships between coaches and athletes.
Yeah, it's definitely not straightforward.
Right. It's easy to just say, oh, that's wrong. But when you actually look closer, it's complicated.
It really is. And I think one of the core issues right off the bat is the power imbalance. There's an article, Are Romantic Relationships Between Coaches and Athletes Unethical? That really spells this out.
How so?
Well, it compares it to like a boss-employee dynamic or teacher-student. There's just an inherent authority there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's not just formal authority. Think about the psychological side. An athlete depends on their coach for training, sure, but also mentorship, emotional support sometimes.
Yeah, totally. That creates a kind of vulnerability, doesn't it?
Exactly. Which can be exploited even if, the coach doesn't mean to.
But at the same time, that same article points out that a good coach-athlete relationship built on trust is like essential for development.
Mm-hmm. Vital, really, whether you're just playing for fun or you're a pro.
So that's the tension right there.
Precisely. You see examples, I think the article mentions Katinka Hasu, the swimmer, and her coach Shane Tusup. Big success story, relationship-wise and professional.
Yeah, Olympic medals.
But then you have that power dynamic still hanging there. It raises these pretty serious ethical flags. Even with success, you have to ask, what were the underlying risks?
And the potential fallout if things go south.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. We're talking reputations, other relationships, even the athlete's whole career, potentially.
Yeah, it's a lot to weigh.
So to really get into the nitty-gritty of these ethics, maybe we should look at a real-world situation.
Definitely. There's been a recent case getting some news coverage. Lily Victoria Janik, she was a teacher and coach at Mullen ISD in Texas.
Ah, yes, I saw headlines about that, an alleged improper relationship with a student.
That's the one. Multiple sources reported on her arrest. It kind of brings all these abstract ethical questions into sharp focus.
Okay, let's try and piece together what actually happened there. The Mullen ISD case.
All right. So based on reports from places like KTXS, Texas Scorecard, Law and Crime Network, it looks like things started back in November 2024.
Okay, what happened then?
That's when Brownwood police apparently got a tip, a report about a possible improper relationship involving a student and someone working at Mullen ISD.
And that someone was Lily Victoria Janik.
Correct. She's 25, and she was working there as both a teacher and a coach.
And the allegation was a relationship with a high school student.
Yes, a student at Mullen High School. The reports allege she initiated it.
Where did these alleged interactions happen? Not at school, I assume.
The reports say she allegedly invited the student over to her house in Brownwood. Multiple times, apparently.
And that's where the alleged sexual activity took place.
That's what the reports indicate, yeah. Law enforcement mentioned interviews with Janik, and others seem to corroborate the allegations.
Wow. Okay, so how did the school district find out? What was their response?
Well, the district, Mullen ISD, they got official word from law enforcement on April 4th, 2025. A letter saying an employee had confessed to inappropriate conduct.
A confession.
Seems like it. And the district's reaction was pretty swift. They immediately reported Janik to CPS Child Protective Services.
Okay.
And they suspended her, barred her from campus, school activities, everything.
So pretty decisive action once they knew.
Yeah, it appears so. Then just a few days later, April 7th, the school board voted to terminate her employment.
Okay. And they notified the state education agency, too.
Yes, the superintendent reported it to the Texas Education Agency.
And what about Janik herself, legally speaking?
Well, on April 23rd, she was arrested by Brownwood police.
On what charge?
Improper relationship between an educator and a student. She was released later on a $50,000 bond, according to the reports.
I think I read somewhere that she didn't actually have a Texas teaching certificate. Is that right? Does that matter?
That detail did come out, yeah. And while it might affect, the specific administrative actions from the Texas Education Agency, the core issue, the breach of trust in that educator role, is still huge, certification or not.
Right. It's about the position itself.
Exactly. It could still impact her ability to ever work in education again, separate from any criminal outcome.
And the school district. Are they providing support for the students?
They've said they are. Offering extra counseling, using their school psychologist, and also linking up with some kind of telemedicine service for child health access.
Okay, so that lays out the timeline. Let's circle back to those ethical points, that power imbalance.
Yeah.
How does this Janik case kind of exemplify that?
Well, It's a pretty stark example, unfortunately. Like that article discussed, the coach or teacher holds all this authority, right? They influence performance, motivation, even team dynamics or grades.
Yeah.
When that relationship turns romantic or sexual, the student might feel scared to disagree or disappoint the coach. They might worry about playing time or their grades.
It's not always overt threats, is it? It can be much more subtle.
Definitely. A coach asking for personal favors, maybe exerting influence outside of just the sport or class, it's pervasive.
And that can lead to abuse.
It can. The article points out that risk, even unintentionally, it can create a situation where the athlete feels pressured, like they can't really say no freely.
Plus the impact on the team. Jealousy, favoritism.
Right, accusations of favoritism, real or perceived. Division. The article mentioned a situation with the Nebraska women's basketball team, similar dynamics.
I remember reading Misha Tate's comments, too, the MMA fighter, about younger female fighters and older male coaches.
Oh, yeah. Her perspective was powerful.
She talked about how a coach involved romantically can feel like they can rule your life. That really stuck with me.
It's chilling, isn't it? Shows how deep that influence can go, way beyond just training.
And if the relationship ends badly.
The consequences for the athlete's career, their mental well-being, can be devastating and long-lasting. The article really hammers that home.
Okay, so let's pivot slightly to the legal side again. The law and crime interview you mentioned.
Yeah.
With a Texas attorney. What were the key legal takeaways for Jennick?
Well, first, the criminal charge itself, improper relationship between educator and student, is a felony in Texas.
Which is serious. Prison time, criminal record.
Exactly. More severe than a misdemeanor. But then there are the administrative consequences, too, through the Texas Education Agency, even without a current certificate.
So double trouble, basically.
Pretty much. The attorney stressed it's a breach of public trust, certificate or no certificate. The student's age matters for criminal law, obviously, but for the administrative side, the ethical breach happens simply because they are a student in that system.
Any other potential legal issues mentioned?
Yeah, the possibility of federal charges wasn't ruled out, and potentially being added to a sex offender registry if convicted.
And given the reported confession, getting a teaching certificate in the future seems unlikely.
Highly unlikely, according to the attorney. Revocation is the probable outcome there.
What about the school district's role and responsibilities, legally?
The attorney mentioned the mandatory reporting duty to CPS, which, as we said, Mullen ISD seems to have done.
That's a legal requirement for teachers in Texas.
Yes, for licensed professionals, they have to report suspected abuse or neglect, even if they don't have concrete proof.
And the district's liability. Can they be sued?
Generally, school districts in Texas have some immunity. And in this case, since Mullen ISD appeared to follow protocol, investigate, report, suspend, terminate their legal position, seems relatively strong based on what the attorney said.
But ethically, there's still a responsibility for prevention, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the attorney noted that Texas has been tightening regulations, stricter penalties for educators who cross the line, and also for people who fail to report it.
Leaves like training is key here.
Definitely. Especially for younger teachers, closer in age to students, training on clear professional boundaries is critical.
What kind of boundaries were suggested?
Things like avoiding situations that could look bad, closed-door meetings with one student, inappropriate social media contact, late-night texts or calls. The attorney emphasized that even if a student is 18, they're still under the school's authority, legally and ethically.
And the role of counseling? Post-incident.
Vital for students, families.
Yeah.
Especially in smaller towns where something like this can really rock the community. Rebuilding trust is huge.
So the school leadership needs to be transparent.
Yeah, transparency, outlining preventative steps, making sure staff know the reporting rules inside and out.
Okay, this really brings us back to the complexity around consent and power. That article we mentioned earlier, are romantic relationships between coaches and athletes unethical? It does acknowledge that consenting adults have autonomy.
It does, yeah. That's an important principle. People have the right to make choices about their bodies and relationships. But the article immediately qualifies that. The ethical alarm bells go off when one person has that position of authority. That inherent power imbalance muddies the waters of consent.
So it might look like consent, but the power dynamic means it might not be truly free and uncoerced.
Exactly. It can create subtle pressures, opportunities for exploitation. And again, thinking about Misha Tate's point, the potential for long-term harm to the athlete's career and well-being. It complicates that simple idea of two adults just making a choice.
It's definitely not black and white.
Not at all. The influence can be so subtle, Maybe a coach offers extra attention, better opportunities. It creates pressure, even if nothing explicit is said.
Right. Now, speaking of different scenarios, we found an interesting Reddit thread that touched on a related, maybe less clear-cut situation.
Yeah, that was interesting. It puts a different spin on it.
Can you tell us about that one?
Sure. It was on your relationships. This guy, 18 years old, works as an extracurricular coach at a high school.
Okay.
And he was asking if it's wrong for him to date an 18-year-old female senior at the same school. He made sure to say he doesn't actually teach her in any classes.
So same age, but he's in a coaching role, she's a student. Did he think it was okay?
Well, he seemed aware it was dicey. He called it a gray area, worried about it looking unprofessional.
Okay, so he had some self-awareness.
Yeah, he mentioned his colleagues were much older and he worried about his job. Apparently, he didn't have a formal contract, but the head coach paid him.
What did people on Reddit tell him?
Overwhelmingly, the advice was no, or at least wait until she graduates.
Why? What were the main concerns?
Mostly the appearance of impropriety, rumors, potential damage to his own future career, needing references, maintaining professionalism, and also protecting the head coach's reputation.
Even without a formal contract, people saw him as staff.
Yeah, that seemed to be the consensus. He was in a position of authority, however informal, within that school setting.
It's interesting to contrast that with the Janik case.
Definitely. The alleged actions in the Janik case are way more serious, clearly illegal and unethical.
But even in the Reddit situation, with peers in age and a less direct power link, the ethics of professional boundaries in school are still front and center.
Exactly. It shows that even the perception of crossing lines can have consequences. The legal side might be different, but the ethical need for clear boundaries, avoiding conflicts of interest, it's still crucial.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, what are the big picture takeaways here?
I think first, recognizing that coach-athlete relationships, while they happen, are inherently tricky because of that power imbalance. It creates ethical minefields.
And even if both people are adults legally, that professional dynamic can really compromise genuine consent and lead to bad outcomes, especially for the athlete.
Right. Second, the Janet case is a really stark illustration of the serious legal and professional consequences for educators who violate that trust.
Yeah, the system can react strongly and quickly.
Absolutely. And third, the Reddit discussion shows that even in less extreme, maybe gray area situations, maintaining those professional boundaries is still super important for everyone involved and for the integrity of the school or sports environment itself.
So it really points towards prevention being key.
Definitely. Strong policies, clear rules, good training for coaches and educators, and creating a culture where it's safe and normal to report concerns. Those things are essential to protect athletes and students.
This has been a tough but really important topic to unpack.
It really has. Lots of layers.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Considering everything we've talked about, what responsibility do we all have, individuals, schools, sports bodies, to make sure these boundaries are respected and enforced? And maybe, what are those really subtle ways power can play out, even when intentions seem okay on the surface? Definitely something to keep mulling over. Thanks for digging into this with me today.